everyone, and welcome to the MR Podcast. The MR Podcast is available on all mainstream radio platforms. Make sure you follow or subscribe to never miss any of our many episodes. In 2020, we are hosting series such as College Life, In the Words of a College Student, Woman Empowerment, Biblical Mentorship, and Productivity 101. This year, the podcast will bring on many guests, such as coaches, teachers, speakers, authors, and many other renowned individuals. Today's special episode is an extension to this month's affirmation series, Part 12, Manifest Wealth, Chapter 1, Understanding and Forming a Wealth Mindset. And today we have the perfect guest to do just that. The title of today's episode is Forming a Wealth Mindset with Coach Terry.
Hey there, Hannah.
Hi, Terry. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really happy to be here with you today.
I know. I'm excited to have you.
So would it be helpful for me to give you a little bit of my background before we get started with our conversation?
Yes, Terry. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hello, everybody. I'm Terry McDougall, and I am a career coach and author of a new book called Winning the Game of Work, Career, Happiness, and Success on Your Own Terms. Before I became a coach, I worked for a very long time in the corporate world as a marketer. And then in 2017, I decided to make a pivot and come out and work as a career coach, helping people find careers that they are happy and satisfied with.
Okay, Terry. Well, as you know, the MR podcast is also based around Mentorship Revolution. And even though we're going to be focusing on building a wealth mindset, do you have much experience with like being a mentor, and how would you define mentorship?
Yeah, I think mentorship is really about helping people understand what their goals are and building a roadmap for them to reach those goals. And mentors typically are people that are further down the path than the people that they mentor, so that they can point out the pitfalls or the things that are that can help them be successful as they move along the path towards their goals.
Right. And, also when I think about mentorship, I also think about many people that become mentors have had mentors themselves, which inspired them. And would you say the same for yourself, that, in order for you to become a mentor later on in your life, that you also had to experience being mentored yourself and how that was?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that mentorship is all about paying it forward, because people that were ahead of me, reached out to help me during my schooling, during my life, during my career. I'm a mother, people helped me to be a better mother in addition to, my career. And, that kind of mentorship is honestly priceless.
It is priceless. And, along with that, I would like for us to start by defining wealth. And I do have a definition for wealth here that I have found that I think will be good for us to discuss, and a few quotes to start. And then once I say this definition and quote, I would love to hear how you define wealth, Terry.
Okay.
So this definition I am going to use in defining wealth comes from a HuffPost article, which was written by Elliot B. Gone, who is also the author of the Intertwine Group. This is what he says. Today, I view true wealth as a three-legged stool. The first leg is financial security. The second is living with purpose. And the third is a healthy mind and spirit. The absence of any of the three renders the others incomplete. It takes them all to create real wealth. And here are a few quotes I found that also touch on the meaning of wealth. Wealth flows from energy and ideas. A quote from William Feather, wealth is not about having a lot of money. It is about having a lot of options. Said by Chris Rock. So Terry, do you have anything that you would like to say in regards to what I just said?
Well, it's funny that I agree with all three of those quotes. And whenever I think about wealth, I think wealth is about purpose, and it's also about having the things that are important to you. And,
Right.
as a coach, one of the things that I see very often when people will come to me, and I think that this is really a mindset of lack when people say this to me, is that they'll come and they'll say, I want this, but I can't have it for some reason.
Yes.
Like I want a better job, but I can't have it. Nobody will hire me because I don't have X, Y, or Z experience, or I don't, I've never done this before. And to
Right.
me, that's a mindset of lack.
It is.
I like to talk about a mindset of abundance, which is believing that the things that you want are true or are possible. And to me, that's the mindset of wealth, is believing in possibility. I actually love that we started this conversation by talking about mentorship, because so often the help and the things that we need to succeed and to meet our goals are actually around us. And
Right.
we don't see them because we believe that they're not here or that it's not possible. Um, there's a quote, and there's a book that I read by Jen Sincero called "You Are a Badass," and I actually
Right.
took the
I've read that
story.
too. I
Yeah,
have that book.
it's a great book, and there was a story in that book that I actually put in my book, and it's about a woman who really, it's like, I guess, in India, and this woman really wants to meet the god Krishna. So she goes out into the forest and she gets down on her knees and she's praying with her eyes closed. And then
Yes.
through the forest comes the god Krishna, and he taps her on the shoulder, and she tells him to buzz off because she's praying for something very important. And I just think that that's such a funny story, because
Yes.
I see it so often that people want things, and they can't see. Sometimes, like, your most fervent wish comes to you in a package that's different than what you expected. And because
Yes.
you tell yourself, oh, I want this, and it comes in a different fashion, you sit there and say, oh my gosh, I never get anything that I want. When if they'd had a more open mindset, they would recognize that, maybe it wasn't a package with $10,000 in cash landing on your doorstep, but it was somebody coming and giving you an opportunity that could get you that. And just remaining open, you start to see the possibilities in the world. And to me, that's the wealth mindset.
Well, Terry, in regards to what you just said, I was really listening closely, and I'm thinking that the reason why we often think like that, doesn't that have to do with the mindset that we have kind of developed in a way? I don't know if you will refer to it as a poor mindset, but you said it's the mindset of lack.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a coach, I really try to help people understand and normalize the feelings that they have, because so often we can, get caught up in our feelings, and we use that to try to defend ourselves against feeling bad. And so we'll tell ourselves things like, to protect ourselves from disappointment, we'll tell ourselves like, well, I'm not going to try because that's not possible.
Right.
And the reality is that really anything is possible, and you don't have to look that far to see some miraculous stories of people. Like I like to think a lot about Oprah Winfrey, because her story is such a great story. And if you looked at her as a child growing up, nobody would think of her that, that she's going to be this, multi-billionaire and
Right.
have a whole media empire and all of that. But it was completely possible. She walked the path to make it happen, and she believed and she worked for this to happen. Now, I don't think that Oprah probably recognized when she was growing up that this was going to happen, but every step of the way, she was open to the possibilities. And, I think it can be an issue if we, sit someplace and we say, I want to be a multi-billionaire, and we don't put a plan in place to make that happen. it's more like, okay, well, I want to, if you're a teenager, you want to get a job, just to make some money, but then
Right.
use that as a stepping stone to get to the next place. And
Yes.
in each place, you look around and you see, what are the opportunities here, and stay open to it. And have the conversations with people. And, as a career coach, I often am encouraging people. A lot of times people will come to me and they'll say, oh, I've been looking for a job for so long and I haven't been able to find anything. And
Same.
I say, well, have you been networking? And they say, oh no, I don't like to network. That's really uncomfortable. And I say, well, yeah, it can be awkward and it can be a little uncomfortable, but if people don't know you, they're not going to hire you, and a lot of people go out and, want to just go on Indeed or LinkedIn and just apply for jobs there, but that's what everybody's doing. And, a lot of times there's hundreds of people that have applied for the same job, and there's no way to really differentiate yourself. But if people know you, and then, and they know what's unique about you, that's the way to put yourself out there. But there's obviously some risk that goes along with that. And, I think that when we think about wealth, you hear the old story, or that old saying, no risk, no reward.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to believe in yourself and put some things at risk. And sometimes it might be a little bit of your pride or your ego to reach out to people and say, hey, I'm interested in what you do for a living, and I'm wondering if you would just have a conversation with me, to tell me how you got to where you are. Those kind of conversations can lead to opportunities, but you have to be willing to step outside your comfort zone to have those conversations.
I agree completely. And I would also ask the question, do you think that confidence is part of forming that wealthy mindset?
Well, it's funny because I think that confidence in a way is a catch-22, right? Because if you're confident, positive things are going to happen, but you have to be confident before that happens. And
Right.
I heard the saying a while ago that I love to share with people, and it's that confidence is the expectation of a positive outcome. And
Yes.
if you really think about that, like, say if you're going to your grandma's house or something like that, and that she loves you to death, right? So you're confident, right? You're going to walk in all smiles, you're going to get a big hug and kiss and, nice meal or whatever. But sometimes we walk into situations and we're not sure, so we don't walk in confidently. But what I try to help people recognize is that this is all in our mind, and we have control over this. We have control about how we enter a room. If we say to ourselves, like, I expect a positive outcome walking into this room, you're going to walk in differently than if you walk in like, I'm not sure what's going to happen here. And, I've seen it many times in my career where there were actually people that maybe didn't know as much as I did, but they showed up more confidently, and they were received more positively because people like that. There's a positive, attractive energy that goes with showing up and smiling and standing up straight and holding your shoulders back and being open to other people.
Right. Wow. Well, I would say, do you think that, so being closed off, if that's what you would call it, has the opposite effect? You think being closed off when you walk into a room, or kind of like, avoiding eye contact or sitting alone, does that have the opposite effect of confidence?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about, I always think about, like, let's just take, I'm going to talk about this because this is my area of expertise about getting hired, that people hire people, right? And
Right.
when people, if you're a candidate or somebody who's, say going to a networking event at college or something like that, if you're sitting over in the corner, it takes other people additional energy to approach you. They may just look at somebody who's sitting over in a corner, not talking to anybody, and think, well, they don't want to talk to people, so I'm not going to approach them. It's sort of like meeting somebody halfway. It just makes it easier. And I also, I mean, I'm speaking from experience because I'm older and I've evolved over the years. I was very shy when I was younger, and I would sometimes be that person that would sort of like walk in very shyly and kind of stand over to the side. And it takes a lot more energy for people, it's got to be somebody who's very extroverted to come and get you. But what I've realized over time is that everybody feels uncomfortable going into, say, a situation that they don't know people. Everybody feels that way. And sometimes just a little bit of friendliness or a little bit of openness actually opens it up for other people too. And I think that a misconception that people have is that everybody else feels comfortable and I'm the only one that doesn't. As a coach, people tell me things in confidence all the time, and the majority of people do not feel comfortable in a situation where they're meeting new people. And so if you recognize that everybody else feels the same way, and then it kind of can give you some freedom to, say hello to somebody, or say, hey, what brings you here? Or, hey, I like your shirt. Just something to break the ice.
Yes.
So that you can start like a human to human conversation. It doesn't have to be earth shattering. It can just be like, hey, isn't this punch good? It's
Right.
pretty simple.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, Terry. So we have talked a little bit about wealth, and I want to ask the question that what have you come to see wealth as being in your life and from your experiences? And can you also define a little bit more what a wealthy mindset is?
Yeah, I'd say that my thoughts about wealth have evolved a lot in my life. Whenever I was growing up, I grew up in a blue collar background. I was actually the first person in my family to go to college.
Okay.
And I always sort of like looked at wealthier families, and I was always like envious. My family, we had enough money. My parents had good jobs, and we would, occasionally go on vacation. I had enough of everything, but I'd see these other people that had fancy cars and fancier clothes, and were going to Hawaii, and and I was envious of that. And it really drove me to get an education so that I could be like that. But I will also say that I also felt for a long time like I wasn't worthy of that. And even though I was working hard, I feel like in some ways I was holding myself back. And I actually remember going to this women's conference, and one of the women there was talking about how you needed to like retrain your subconscious mind to be able to accept the good things that you wanted. Because I think in some ways, because I grew up the way that I did, I just thought that, like, I guess subconsciously, I thought that I wasn't really worthy of the abundance that some people that were around me had. And even though I would say, I say this a lot, that I work with people that are successful but not satisfied. I was successful but not satisfied. I was moving along in my career, but yet I wasn't reaching the heights and the advancement that I longed for. And I remember leaving this conference, actually it was in Greensboro, North Carolina, and getting in my car and driving, and I felt like an idiot, but I did what this woman had said in the conference, which I was driving and I said, I'm worth $100,000 a year. I'm worth $100,000 a year. And at first it was really hard for me to say that because I wanted to make at least $100,000 a year. And I felt stupid. I felt like, I felt myself resisting this idea as I said it. But what she had said in the conference was that, the more that you act as if, the more that you get used to this idea, you will start to believe that this is possible. And that did happen for me. I'd say within a year of me doing that, I ended up, starting to make more than $100,000 a year. I got a big, actually that's the job that moved me to Chicago. I got hired for another job. It was a very big promotion for me. And I really do credit it with me beginning to, I guess, challenge this subconscious belief that I had that I wasn't worthy of the things that I wanted. And, sometimes we do this because we want to protect ourselves from disappointment. We'll say to ourselves like, well, I want that, but that's for other people. But when you finally like recognize, no, like I really do want that, and I really am worthy of that, and I am willing to, kind of step into the light and say to myself, I'm worthy of this, and I'm going to believe it. Once you do that, it sort of like removes the blocks to things happening. I mean, it doesn't happen automatically, right? You still have to work for it. But if you don't address this, what you'll find is that you'll self-sabotage yourself. Like maybe you get the interview for the big promotion, but then you show up late, or you're not prepared, or there's something that will happen that will pull you back, because there's sort of like an internal tug of war going on between your subconscious belief and what you want consciously. And so, by me driving in my car and saying, I'm worth $100,000 a year, that was retraining my subconscious to believe that.
Yes. And as I said, this is actually part of the affirmation series. So in a way, you are affirming what you wanted to see. And in a way, as you said, the self-sabotage, do you think that it is possible that some people are happy settling for less, or maybe some people are happy going according to the norm, if this makes any sense?
Well, I mean, I think people are comfortable there. And I think that there's a lot of people that are, I see it very often in my coaching practice, that they'll come to me because they have some pain in their life, right? That they're like, I'm in this job and I'm doing well here, but I'm really not very happy with it. And we start getting into, well, what is it that you would be happy with? And sometimes people don't even allow themselves to go there, because they'll stop themselves. They'll self-edit before they even dream of what it is that they want.
Yeah.
And I hear it all the time. They'll say, well, I'd really like to do this, but no, there's no way I can do this. I'm too old, or I would have to go back to school to do that. And it's not always true. And often if you really get down to like, what's the feeling that you want? There's many different ways to get to that feeling. And just as and I guess you were asking me the question earlier about my definition of wealth. Wealth to me is self-satisfaction, that you're living your life the way that you want to live it. And I do agree that, being financially solvent is part of that. But obviously, depending on what your lifestyle is and what you want out of your life, I mean, maybe some people are going to be living in Laguna Beach in California in a $10 million house. And to them, that's their dream. Or somebody else could be living in, a 1-bedroom condominium, and they feel like they're just super wealthy, right? Even though it might not even be that fancy, or where they could be renting a 1-bedroom apartment. But if they feel like they're living their life and they don't have pain and they are able to enjoy themselves, that could be wealth to that person. And we see it often, where somebody is a multimillionaire and they just feel like they don't have enough, and somebody else is living a very simple life and they're very satisfied. And, the question is, which one of those two people is wealthier, right? I mean, money is just a concept. It's what it gets for you, and how you value that is really how wealth is determined in my mind.
Okay, we can understand now more clearly what wealth is and how to begin thinking about wealth in a way that is inspiring and renovating. Since the goal we are all aiming for is to eventually build a wealth mindset, Terry, how can the people listening to this episode begin building a wealthy mindset, especially if they might be starting from ground zero? Maybe you can start by sharing small goals to make or steps to take.
Yeah, I always think really start with getting very clear on what it is that you want. And I think that deep down inside, we all know what we want. And it might not be super, you know, clear what it looks like, but we know that feeling. And I think way too often people shut that down, or they, like I mentioned earlier, they will start to edit themselves. Like that feeling and that thought about what they want starts to emerge. And then they like want to put a cap on it really quickly because they're like, oh no, that's going to require that I go out and do something risky. And so I'm just going to shut that down right now, you know? And I always say these are two separate things. Like what you want can be out there. It can sit there on its own. And how to get there, how to do it is separate. And they don't have to be completely intertwined, at least in the beginning. And you always have choices about, okay, I know I want this, and this is what I'd have to do. Like for an example, I'll actually give you a personal example. When I was in college, I thought that I wanted to get an MBA at some point in my future. But I didn't have a lot of money. My parents weren't going to help me go to, business school after I graduated from college. So I just worked and I took the GMAT so I'd be prepared, but I didn't go back to school for 7 years. Because the timing just wasn't right. But I had it, like I had taken the GMAT, so I was prepared. And then I got to a certain point where I kind of woke up and I thought, this would be a good thing for me to do. So you can have these two things separately. Like if I had allowed myself when I was 22 to say, well, I want to go back to business school, but I don't have the money to do that. And just shut it down right there, that would have been impossible. And the reality was that even when I did decide to go back to school, I still didn't know how I was going to make it happen. I didn't have money saved up or anything. But when I started on that path, it was almost miraculous in a way, like how everything opened up. I was able to get a loan, and I was able to get a job, and I was able to get freelance work as a graphic designer. And I made it through full time, 2 years in business school. But had I just allowed myself to say, like, I want this, but I don't have money, it would have shut it down and I never would have done it. So, try to separate like your wants from how you're going to do it, because sometimes it's just timing, and you start to see, oh, here's a path that I can take to get to that thing. It might be years before you do it, but allow that idea and that love for the thing that you want to exist.
It's interesting that you said oftentimes we have to separate the wants and how we're going to do it, because I think we've often been trained to either want things too fast or to believe that we can't have them at all. So I would ask the question, in building a wealthy mindset, do you think that patience is an important character trait to have?
Yeah, I think so. I'd say that it's a kind of a combination of patience and openness, because, if you keep your eyes open, and much like that story I told earlier about the woman in the forest waiting for Krishna, like if she had kept her eyes open, she would have seen that the thing that she wanted was right there in front of her.
Right.
And, I actually was just talking with somebody yesterday who, I was doing actually a free coaching session for this women's group that I'm involved in. And it was somebody that wanted to make a career pivot into something that was very different than what she had done before. She actually wanted to get into diversity and inclusion, and she had been a film producer. And, and she was saying, oh, well, I want to do this, but I don't have an HR background, and maybe nobody's going to really look at me this way. And I said, well, there's so many different ways that you could get into diversity and inclusion. It's not just about, you going in and being like the HR representative on D&I. It could be that you go to work for an organization whose mission is diversity and inclusion, and you actually go in and you're the producer for all of their video content. You know, like, so there's ways that you can use what you have and pivot to fulfill what your desire is. Because I don't really think that her desire was necessarily to be the HR rep for D&I. It was really to use her talents to further something that was very important to her.
Right.
You know, and there's different, if you sort of reframe it differently like that, you can find ways to, you know, you can find the path or the stepping stones to get from where you are to where you want to go. But you just have to, you know, like, be willing to step into the gray area and not just look at everything as like completely black and white, like either yes or no. You know, it's either 0 or 100%. You know, it can be somewhere in between.
So Terry, do you think that titles or image is very intimidating to some people?
Absolutely. I know it is. And it certainly has been in my career as well. But as I've gotten older, and I, like, you know, when I was in the corporate world, I rose to the level of director of marketing. And, you know, I actually found it kind of interesting sometimes, you know, when somebody younger, I could tell that they were sort of like a little intimidated or tongue-tied. And I found it a little bit funny and a little bit curious. I mean, not that I was making fun of them, but I didn't see myself as an intimidating person, you know, at all. And I actually could relate very much to them, because I remembered whenever I was younger and I was dealing with older people. I think it's just a matter of, you know, valuing yourself and treating other people with respect. You know, if you want to get in front of somebody who's, you know, got more authority or whatever, one of the things that you may have to deal with is that they have busy schedules. And if you know, say, for example, want to do an informational interview, you know, you just have to be respectful about how you approach it. And don't think that you're necessarily going to get an hour on their calendar if you wanted to talk to somebody, but you might be able to get 10 minutes. And, you know, and I look at it like being respectful would be showing up prepared, showing up on time, being appreciative. And this is one of the things that I actually coach people on, and they're kind of surprised sometimes when they're dealing with somebody who's like more senior, is make sure, if you're networking, make sure that you offer reciprocity. And a lot of times people will say, well, what, you know, I'm young, like, how can I help? You never know. Each of us has unique knowledge. And it could be like, oh, well, you went to this particular university and my daughter is thinking about going there. Would you be willing to jump on the phone with her and tell her what campus life is like? You just don't know. I mean, you might be looking to them like, oh, do you have a job for me? Or can you tell me what it's like to work in your industry? But they might say like, hey, I'm going to be visiting your town. Where's a good place to get a slice of pizza? You just don't know.
So, Terry, we are so excited to have you as a special guest on the MR podcast, and very grateful to have you with us on the show today. I would like to know a little bit more about how your journey to building a wealthy mindset has unfolded. Maybe there were some bumps in the road, hard lessons learned, or some really funny moments.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I'll give you one.
Okay.
When I worked at a bank in North Carolina, and I was sort of like the right-hand person to the head of marketing for the area I worked in. And, you know, he really relied on me heavily, and he left the bank, and they didn't fill the role for several months. And so I sort of stepped in informally to help lead the department. And when they finally posted the position, I applied for it. And the first interview was with HR. I did well. The second interview was a panel interview, and I did not do well. I actually got very nervous, and I pretty much bombed. And I felt very humiliated, and I felt a lot of shame, because the people that I interviewed with were people that I was going to see all the time. And I just
Oh,
felt, and so I decided, even though I knew that I wasn't going to move forward for that role, which I thought I was very uniquely qualified for because I was pretty much doing the role already,
right.
I hired a coach because I said to myself, like, I'm not going to let this, you know, I guess, disaster or this huge mistake that I make stop me. And so I hired a coach to work with me and learn how to interview better. And then the funny thing that happened was that they got all the way to the end of that interview process. The person who they offered the job to turned it down, and they didn't want to offer it to anybody else that they had interviewed. So they started the process all over again. And I actually reapplied. And this time I got all the way down to the finals for the role. And it was me and an external candidate. And I felt so much more comfortable. I actually, speaking about the wealth mindset, I actually went out, I invested in new clothes. I got like nicer clothes than what I normally wore to work so that I looked like I was ready for that next level.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they actually offered the job to the external candidate and he took it. And of course, I felt very disappointed. But the funny thing was the day that I found out that I didn't get the job, I had a call from a recruiter on my voicemail when I came back from lunch. And by the time that this period finished, I had 2 job offers. I was interviewing at the third company, and one of those job offers was the offer that brought me from North Carolina to Chicago. And that was the one that I got a very big raise. And so it was really about me believing, investing my time and energy and, some investment of money into my belief that I was ready to move to the next level. And because of that, the wealth, the literal, financial wealth did come to me.
Thank you, Terry, so much for all that you have given us on this episode. And I have one last question before we end.
Okay, great.
If you could say predictable or unpredictable, which more has your journey been as far as your career, the success that you have in your life, and even understanding wealth? Has it been predictable or unpredictable?
I would say completely unpredictable. It's been very opportunistic. Everything from, I grew up in rural Delaware. I went to college in Virginia. My first job was in Boston, and that was only because I had a boyfriend in college who was from Boston, and I went and visited him. And while I was there, I thought, I'll just look for a job while I'm here. And so it ended up, that's how my career started. And then from there on, I just kind of looked at things and if I saw something that looked interesting, I just went for it. And it's been a very interesting journey.
Well, it's interesting that you said unpredictable, because I do think there are many people who prefer the predictable route. And would you agree with that?
Of course. And, here's what I say. We can't predict the future. And even things that worked for people in the past, we don't know that that's going to work going forward. And the times that we're living in right now, with coronavirus, just demonstrate that, whatever is going to work going forward is going to be a different playbook than what worked in the past. And I understand why people want something predictable, but there's no guarantees. And I think that, I think I shared this saying with you earlier, that there's a Nelson Mandela quote that I love, which is, I never lose, I always win or learn. And
yes.
that gives me a lot of confidence to just try things.
Right, going forward.
Just going forward. There's no perfect path. We have to just take imperfect action. And sometimes there's some beautiful coincidences that happen because we take a risk and we go out and see what's out there. And in my experience, what I've found is that the things that I didn't plan a lot of times turned out much better than I could have even imagined had I planned it, because you leave room open for other people to step in and help and bring their knowledge and expertise to you. And it's, that's synergy, and there's something really beautiful about that, but you have to risk a little bit to believe that it's possible.
Terry has something that she want to offer all of MR's special members and supporters. Terry, can you share your website with the listeners so that they will know where to go?
Yes, my website is terrybmcdougall.com, and there's a free offer on my homepage, which is 7 steps to your next promotion. And also, because I know that some of your listeners probably are in college, anybody that signs up for that, I will also send you out 5 steps to creating a career that you love. And that actually goes through, I've got a list of questions that, can help you kind of get to the heart of what it is that you really want, to help you start looking out in the marketplace to see where you can add value, how to cultivate a network, and how to take imperfect action. So, that's a nice guideline and worksheet that people can go through to help them with that.
Terry, as we come to an end, is there anything else that you want to make sure your listeners have gained a good understanding on that they can take with them?
Well, I have a philosophy that we are all here on earth for a reason. And I encourage people to go out and find the unique reason why you are here. Recognize that your path is going to be different from anybody else's path. And, believe that the things that you want are worthy. Go for it.
That is completely true. And I encourage all of our listeners to do the same. I am Hannah Lassiter, the founder of Mentorship Revolution, the main host and speaker of the MR podcast, and the author of Poetry for Girls That Struggle. Terry, we thank you so much for being on the podcast today, and we hope that you enjoyed being on here yourself.
I really did enjoy it, Hannah, and I think that your mission is a great one. I appreciate you having me on the show today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning into the MR podcast today, and we are tuning out.